Hello there and welcome back to another video here on Wristwatch Revival. My name is Marshall. Thank you so much for coming along. This time on the bench, we have this lovely vintage JLC Powermatic that I bought off of eBay. And I've always wanted to work on these, and I got a really nice one here with the dial. As you can see, it's a little beat up, but I love this model, and I've never got a chance to work on one before. So yeah, we're going to be restoring this today and seeing if we can't bring it back to a full and healthy life to live on someone's wrist. As you can see, it has had a bit of life. This is gunk that gets built up if you wear a watch for a really long time and never clean it or take it in for service or anything where somebody might clean it up. Ugh. And yeah, also I'm going to use my one of my favorite tools. This is my spring. My bolt action spring bar tool. Not exactly, whoa, look at that. The tip went flying off and you can see the spring inside of the spring bar. Yeah, not exactly like a necessary tool. If you do need something to take the spring bars out, but this one's just like the best one ever. It's one of the cool things about hobbies like this, right, are the tools. Like if you know what I'm talking about, then you definitely know what I'm talking about. And this is one of those. Take a look at the case back on this thing though. I don't think I've ever opened one with a case back of that design. I'm going to start with my trusty friction ball case back opener. It's just a rubber ball, but it can get a lot of grip and a lot of torque on that. And it is not budging. Yeah, that thing didn't move an inch. So we got to break out the big guns here. This is the case back opening tool. This is a tool whose sole purpose is to open up case backs and also put them back on. As I mentioned, the tools are one of the fun things about this hobby, so I got this thing. But we actually need it this time because this thing does not want to budge. Now, in order to open up that type of case back, I'm going to need to switch out the attachments, and I'm going to look for ones with a flat edge that will grip the side. Yeah, like that. I can then grip in on the side of that case back, and then hopefully that will be enough grip for us to pry it free. As you can see, this type of tool is set up so that you can open up all different types of case backs. It has, I think, 8 sets of these attachments for basically everything. The only ones that it doesn't work on are Rolex. You need different attachments for that because Rolex. Okay, let's see if this thing will... Oh, wow, that does not want to budge. Oh, and it's just sliding around now, too. Goodness sakes. Okay, well... Let's try it again. I'm going to try to tighten it down a little bit more this time and see if we can't get it. Ugh. No, it is sliding on the edge. That thing does not want to budge. All right, we're going to have to go to stage 3. And in this case, I'm going to try some penetrating oil. So this is an oil. It's a product that's specifically designed to get into threads or things like that of metal. And it's supposed to get inside of there and kind of break up any type of rust or anything that might be holding it together, a seal or whatever, and it might give us a chance. So I'm going to use my tweezers here to grab little bits of the oil. I don't want to like drown the thing in it if I can help it, and put it all around the edge where the case back meets the case. And then we'll see if after, I'll probably leave it for a few hours, and then we'll see if it gives us what we need here. We have a few other options, but they start getting kind of sketchy really quickly. Like this is a fairly tame next step, and I really hope it just works because I really want to see this movement, honestly. This is a potentially gorgeous movement in this thing because of the company who made it. All right, let's see. Come on, baby. So I'm going to clamp this down really hard, and yes, all right. We have movement. And we get to see the movement in a second here too. Oh man, that feels good. I don't think I've ever had one that was clamped down that hard. Let's see what the movement looks like. Oh my goodness. Oh, that is gorgeous. Wow, that really lived up to their reputation. So the company that makes this watch, I mentioned that they're called JLC, or in French, they pronounce it Jaeger-LeCoultre. And it's like kind of the watchmakers movement company. They make movements for other companies and they have their own brand as well. And look how beautifully finished this is. This is what they call a bumper movement also. This rotor just goes from here on the spring and then it flies around and hits that other spring. And when it does that, it winds up the watch. This watch predates the full spinning 360-degree rotors that we have now. Let's take a quick look on the time graph. Oh no. Well, we got ourselves a snowstorm here, friends, and that means minus 400 seconds a day, low amplitude, and unacceptable beat rate. Just another day at the office here at Wristwatch Revival. So let's get into this thing. Who knows when the last time it was serviced is? Those numbers don't really mean that much to me. This thing could be very well capable of running much better than that. So the first thing we'll do is take off this case clamp, and I have to say already I'm impressed. Look at this screw. Look at the polish on the top of that thing. Also, it's huge. And it's holding down a single case clamp. Usually this is done by two of them that kind of wedges the movement in. That's a really elegant design. I kind of wish I saw that more. And look at that dial. Wow, that thing is beautiful. Wow, I love dials like this. This is a beautiful layout. And you may have noticed that little window at the front. Now, this thing's called a Powermatic, and here's why. That is one of my favorite complications, which is just another name for like a feature on a watch. That is a power reserve. Think of it like a gas tank for your car. And as I wind it up, you see how the number gets higher. That's how many hours this watch will run. So right now we're at 20, going to 25, and up to 30. And this way you always know if your watch is wound up, if you need to either give it a wind, or in this case, you can just simply wear the watch around and it'll wind itself because again, it is an automatic movement. It's a bumper, but it's still an automatic movement. And I love that feature. It's actually one of my favorite features on a watch. I know it's weird because it's ultimately not that useful, but I love it. It's kind of like a battery meter on your phone. All right, first we'll start by taking off the hands. These are called Dauphine hands. It's just the style that they used to use back then. They're okay. Not my favorite, but they look good on this watch. This watch very likely dates to the 50s based on the technology that we see inside of it. You can see the hands are a little bit corroded on the back, but I think they're okay. It's a very small slit that loom actually has to go through, so it usually holds up quite well. It doesn't fall out. If it did, we'd have to reloom the hands, but I don't think we'll have to here. Okay, now here is the case as well as the crystal. Taking a quick look, yeah, we can just pop the crystal out and probably just going to end up replacing it. That's totally fine. Crystals are inexpensive and it's good to replace them. Man, I love that dial. Now, what we're going to do is a little experiment here. I have it on 40 and I'm going to leave it for a couple of days and oh, it actually worked. So now it says it's got about 5 hours left. So it looks like I left it for about a day and a half. And you can see we're in the red here as well, indicating, must wind soon or watch will stop. And I'll oblige it. And once again, you can take a look at how this works as I wind it. And again, since this isn't automatic, this will happen automatically as you wear the watch throughout the day. That is so cool. A very small feature, but one that I really, really like. Okay, so now we can continue with our disassembly here. And once again, take a look at this beautifully finished movement. These are just hidden gems to me. The fact that these things are just around on eBay and you can pick them up. This one was listed as for repair, but it didn't actually say anything about like the condition. Like it didn't say it wasn't or was running. So I'm not really sure, like if they just figured I don't want to have the hassle of having somebody say, hey, it doesn't work. And so they just put it up as for repair, and it definitely needs a service. It's not running very well, but I mean, it looks like it's fine. I don't see any, honestly, the movement's in very, very good shape. Okay. And as you can see here, the teeth of this rotor interact with this funny looking part here. And that's actually how the watch gets wound up. So we can take off the rotor here. It's big, heavy. You can feel it a little bit on your wrist when it's slapping around. It's kind of funny. Okay, I'm going to try to just hold this part. Oh, never mind. It just flew away. I guess there's more wine in this watch than I realized. Oh, that's right. I wound it up to show to show you. It's your fault. And I didn't unwind it, although I don't even know how I would let the mainspring down on this. At any rate, the parts don't look like they've gone far. That's that one right there. And then there's just a little click in the screw that holds it on. So we got lucky with that one. I'm going to also remove the balance bridge as well as the balance at this point. This is pretty common procedure for me, just as a safety precaution mainly. There's no reason to have the balance attached while we take apart the rest of the movement. And as you can see, watch this spring. You see how fragile that spring is? That is why. You do not want to have that thing getting banged around. You see that screw way down in that recess there? There's 2 of those, and those are how you remove the dial. There's a post on the underside of the dial, and the screw interacts with that post and holds the dial in place. So if I unscrew those, I should be able to remove the dial. Oh, God, I love that dial. All right. And you can see the little wheel underneath it acts as the power reserve. We're going to have to figure out how that works. I've never worked on one from JLC like this, so I don't actually know how it works. Okay, it looks pretty straightforward. Sure. I've got to be careful with the paint on that. That thing is what actually turns. And then this, what is that? That looks like it's attached to something on the other side, like poking through the movement. So that must be how they get the power reserve through. I'm going to use my special tool here. That's right. I've got a tool for that too. This is a cannon pinion remover, but it'll work here too. And yeah, sure enough, that is friction fit. It looks like onto a post. And I'm assuming that that post is what tracks how much the watch is wound or unwound at any given point. So I'm going to need my cannon pinion removal tool again here if I want to take that part off. But for now, I can just wait and go for a little bit more of the keyless works. Always make sure to inspect the parts when I take them out. You know, just keeping my eye out for anything that might not look right, might be missing, might be obviously damaged. I can do more inspection after the parts are cleaned, and then I can like even look at them on the microscope if I feel that something might be weird or if something doesn't feel right when I'm putting it back together. All right, now, once again, the cannon pinion remover comes out, and there it goes. It's doing strong work today. It actually removed 2 different things. I don't think I've ever had to do that. Now, flipping the movement back over, I can start to disassemble the main plate on top here. That seems to be just one large kind of 3/4 plate that covers up the rest of the movement. So let's see what's underneath. Oh boy, stuff's flying around. Okay, so there's some stuff on the bottom part of that 3/4 plate, and then, oh, I see. So these little clutches are that's what that little tiny thing that I had to remove on the other side was attached to. So somehow these are, yep, you can see they're attached to the barrel. And the barrel is what the mainspring is inside of, and so it tracks how much that thing is wound up. That is awesome. Wow. That is a very clever way to do that. I am impressed. Now we can take off the train of wheels. Try to remember where those go. And here comes the barrel. The mainspring's inside of that. That's what gets wound up when you wind your watch. And again, that's what we're trying to track, right? I'm going to have to make sure that like when I put that little wheel back in that shows the numbers, the 10, 20, 30, 40, that the watch has absolutely no power in it, so that we make sure to start our gas tank from 0, as it were. Okay, now there's a little intermediate bridge here that goes over the center wheel, and I can remove that. This is one way that they did back in the day to get a center seconds hand, which, as you saw when I took apart the movement, this watch has. And here's the escape wheel coming out as well. And that'll just leave the pallet bridge and the pallet fork underneath. Oop, there we go. Sometimes the screws will stick to this, and sometimes you just drop them. Stick to the screwdriver, either because of magnetism or if there's something on the screwdriver or something on the screw. Wow, that thing really jumped too. This is a jumpy little piece. Okay, that looks fine though. And now we can take out the pallet fork itself. And it jumped too. What is going on? Oh my, now it fell. What's happening here? Okay. Set it. Now it sticks to the screwdriver. And that's the bottom of the setting lever on the keyless works, which we can now take apart, by the way. This is, again, very elegantly designed. This is a spring that oftentimes in the movements that we work on here on the channel is just a bent wire. And this is a beautifully machined spring. It acts on that little bar right there called the return bar or the yoke. And now I can take out the winding stem and the crown, and I can remove the sliding clutch and the clutch wheel. They just fall down when you take it apart. Although they're sticky. So that's the sliding clutch, but where in the world did the clutch wheel even go? Oh, there it is. It actually stuck to the bottom of the movement holder. I've never actually had that happen. That's crazy. And then on the other side of this plate, it looks like there's two wheels, which I assume one of them has to do with the Powermatic part. I've got to make sure that I remember where this screw went. The power reserve functionality, and then the other one probably has to do with the automatic winding works, is what I'm assuming, because it's right next to where the barrel sits. And if you're going to have teeth that interact with the barrel, that means you're either winding it up or you're doing something else. And if you're doing something else in this case, it probably means that you're tracking how much it's been wound. But these all need to be disassembled and cleaned just like everything else. It looks like this is maybe two parts, but I can't quite tell. I'll just deal with that later. All right, now we can take apart the mainspring. It is funny, it says unbreakable mainspring. That was something that came out during this time. It was when they switched over from using old style springs to a new alloy that's much, much stronger. They may have gotten a little ahead of themselves on the whole unbreakable thing, but it is better. And frankly, this mainspring looks fantastic. I'm going to assume that this was replaced at some point down the line, just given the age of this watch. We'll see how it looks after we get it out. The only real way to remove these is just to walk them out with your fingers. You have to try to be careful. You don't want to bend the spring, right? You don't want to push it up against the wall of that thing. Also, it can flip up and hit you in the face, so you have to be careful. Okay, now we can put everything into these little mesh baskets. And of course, that means that they're going to be next up for their time in the watch cleaning machine. This is part of the process. It's honestly one of the best parts of the process because you just don't get to do this very often with the stuff that you own, right? Like you don't do this with really anything where it's like completely disassembled and then it gets fully cleaned and then reassembled. It's very satisfying, as you might imagine. So everything's in this mesh basket, and now we can head over again to the watch cleaning machine. I use an old one. This one probably was made around the same time that this watch was, in the 40s or 50s. But yeah, it works really, really well. It's called an L&R Mastermatic. There's also a L&R Master, which just spins. This one actually oscillates back and forth like that, which, can help the parts get a little bit cleaner. But I've used this one since I got it a few years ago, and it has been awesome. While the parts are being cleaned, I did want to mention that I have a Patreon for my channel here. Patreon's a place where you can go to support your favorite content creators, whether it's podcasts or music or artwork or YouTube videos. You can head on over to Patreon and check it out. For mine, I have it set up so that two things. One, if you sign up, you get a thank you card and a Wristwatch Revival sticker in the mail, no matter what level you sign up for. And two, it's really flexible. You can quit anytime. You can adjust your amount anytime. You can come back anytime. People do that all the time. So it means you are fully in control of what you want to do. You can put a limit on the monthly. I actually have it set up so that it charges per video rather than per month because I like to deliver to you. I like to put that onus on myself, and I don't want to feel weird if I can't for a month, for whatever reason. So that's how it's set up. If you're interested, it is patreon.com/wristwatchrevival, and there's a link down below. Now, after the parts are fully cleaned up, we get a really beautiful thing. I mean, look at this. All of the parts of the watch laid out, and this one is a stunner. It really is. This is simple finishing. They use things called Geneva stripes, another technique called perlage, but it's done really well. Just simple, beautiful movement in a vintage watch. Now, the first thing that we need to do on our reassembly journey here is we need to put a little bit of what we call braking grease around the inside wall of the mainspring barrel. And This is a really important step only for automatic watches. Non-automatic watches have a hook that goes on the inside barrel wall. And that's why when you wind up a manual wind watch, it hangs, it stops at some point and it tells you, okay, I'm done. But automatics don't. They just keep spinning even as you walk around, with the rotor banging back and forth. And so it needs to be able to slide just a little bit around the edge to not create a bunch of metal shavings and stuff. This is one of the best. This is kind of the tool that you get when you cross the line from I'm a hobbyist to I'm really trying to start restoring these things, because these are called mainspring winders and they're very expensive. This set was, I think it was just around $1,000, right? I mean, we're talking no joke tools here. Like, this is where you kind of take a deep breath and plunge. Now, the good news is that, even if you don't end up using it or if you go a different direction, you can sell these on eBay very easily. They're always in demand. But this is, at least for me, it was one of the things that when I ordered, I said, okay, I'm really enjoying this. I'm going for it. and I dove in. Like I said, the tools that were also some of the most fun parts about this. Speaking of that, by the way, I did start a watch website with my friend Alex. It's called sutcliffehansen.com. And we have toolkits there. So if you would like to try your hand at watchmaking, we've got toolkits kind of spaced out for, oh, hold on. Best part. Oh, the best part. Again, this is just one of the many little joys that you get in watchmaking. Anyway, we have toolkits there for beginners and even more people that are willing to jump right in a little more down the advanced end. Again, it's sutcliffehansen.com. There's a link down below. So now that we've got the barrel all put back together, a little bit of medium viscosity oil goes on the top, and then we can replace the barrel lid. Even the barrel looks nice on this thing. I've got this little tool that I got as well to help put the barrel lid back in place. You can just use tweezers for this, or I guess even your fingers probably, but this thing was cheap. And again, more tools. So now let's put together the underside of this plate, this 3/4 plate that goes on the top. I'm going to use, again, a little bit of medium viscosity oil here, and then we'll put it back together. This has to be done before we can put this plate back on. And, you just remember that from when we took it apart, that this is one of the things we did after we took this off. So makes sense to reverse that. So I'll just tighten this down gently. This is a rather thin posted screw, and you do have to be kind of careful with those. They can get you. Okay, so there's like a washer that goes on the bottom, and then there's the gear that goes around. And I'm going to put a little bit of medium viscosity oil where the gear meets up with its holder, which is right here, so that it can run smoothly. Again, one of the big reasons that we do this whole big process on these watches, and by the way, this happens about every 5 to 7 years. If you're taking really good care of your watch, it will actually run longer than that. It won't stop after that much time. But after that much time, usually the lubricants have broken down to a reasonably large amount. And that usually means that you start to get metal on metal or too much friction. And that can affect things in two ways. One of them is that the watch won't perform as well. It'll lose time, that type of thing. It's less efficient. And then also it can impact the longevity of the watch, because if a part gets worn over and over and over and over and over, it can wear itself or the thing that it's acting on out. And then it needs to be either repaired or replaced when you do bring in your watch for service. And of course, you'd much rather pay for just a normal servicing on something like this rather than having to have somebody track down parts on a 80, 70-year-old watch or whatever. Okay, so I'm not really sure exactly how to go about putting this together, because it is a little weird. Now, I know that this part goes in first, and I've put in the escape wheel as well, because it looks like it's kind of seated underneath that center wheel. There may be enough room for me to slide it in even after, but I'm just kind of, playing it safe, I guess. So we'll see how this goes. I can put the screws on this little intermediate bridge that holds this in place. You'll see I often use one of these plastic pointers, And that acts as kind of your other hand. You know, it's a way to stabilize something, because when you do watchmaking, you really shouldn't be touching the movement with your fingers very much, if at all. Certainly not with your bare fingers. I think it's a little overblown, but there is a small chance that the oils and the chemicals that are on your finger can discolor the metal and at least make it look worse, if not actually corrode it a little bit. I have seen this before on a couple of watches that I did where I could clearly see a fingerprint and it wouldn't go away. So it is a thing. People tend to freak out about it a little bit. And I'm a little more of the practical side. If you were to go to a watch repair technician shop, you know, in Switzerland, they would gasp. You know, they work in a clean room, basically, you know, a vacuum, you know, that kind of thing. But, you know, for a hobbyist like me, I mean, I'm working on this is my desk. That's my mouse pad, right? Like that's where I edit these videos at the same desk that I shoot them at, you know? So for me, it's like, it is what it is. I did get one of those little air filter things that runs over in the corner of my office just to think maybe if it could take away a little bit of the dust, but I mean, that's not the same thing as what we're talking about, you know, with the real places. All right. So from memory, this was a 3-piece part that has this really interesting little post on it with its own little gear and pinion sticking off to the side. And then it sits between 2 clutches. And what it looks like to me is it's not actually a clutch, meaning it doesn't, you know, clutches work with friction, right? Where it's like one material and another, in this case, it would be metal and metal, are sliding up against each other. But I don't think that's what these are. They do look like that, but I don't think that they actually do that. What I think they do is they provide somewhere for the little roller pinion to actually engage on the top and the bottom. That's what I believe is happening. Okay, so now we can make at least an attempt. How do I... Okay, I know the bottom where it goes, and this looks about right, but there are numerous things that need to be lined up here. In this case, there are 5. Now, 2 of them are quite large, the barrel and then that little extra part that we just put on that does the tracking of how much power's in the movement. So those ones are fairly easy, but the 3 wheels that we're trying to line up here, those are very, very small, you know, pivots. And that pivot's like the axle, the little tip that sticks out there. And we need to do that. I am going to give credit to JLC for making a great movement here, because that actually seemed like it was going to be a lot harder. But it did just sort of snap into place, and I'm thrilled with it, because that could have been, you know, half an hour on the microscope trying to get everything lined up, and it ended up being a lot easier than that. I'm quite relieved, to be honest. Which means now, by the way, that we can flip the movement over and start working on the keyless works. And these are actually clutches, like I mentioned. And that's why I'm putting this blue grease on there. This is called Mobius 9501. And this is the heaviest grease that we have for the movement. And that's because this clutch is metal on metal. You know, a clutch in a car is like a specific material that's meant to have friction put on it and last for a really long time. And this is a little different. This is just steel. So, you know, you do need to make sure that that is properly lubricated, or you will get rough winding potentially. And then also longevity will plummet. They're also, by the way, those 2, the clutch part is pressed together by a spring that holds tension on it too. So you really need to make sure that you put some oil there. All right. Now we can put the rest of the keyless works together. There's 2 intermediate gears here that transfer the turning of the crown. This is for setting the watch up the chain here, right to the middle where the watch is actually set. And again, we do need the crown as well as the stem. This is called the winding stem. And I'm using that same blue grease here for the same reason. This is metal on metal. Oop. Okay, there we go. That means that it is now properly seated, and we can now put on the setting lever. Setting lever is a little bit tricky because it actually screws in from the other side. So I use one finger to hold it down, and then I screw it in from the other side. And when I set it down, it's nicely into place. And as long as, you know, I can pull this and make it, go back and forth like that, that means that it's engaged properly and that it's down tight enough. That's the thing that you unscrew to take out the stem. Okay, now we can put on the yoke, or as I mentioned, some people call it the return bar. This thing has a spring on it, and it actually pushes up against those clutches that I mentioned before. And again, this one has a particularly beautiful yoke spring right here that you can see. Normally, it's just this U-shaped wire. It's the one that I usually call the Born to Fly spring if you watch a lot of my videos. And, you know, it's nothing really special, but this one is. This one's like this beautifully machined, curved out spring. And these little details in these movements are what make them so exciting. And like I said, I'm really kind of smitten by this watch. I just think that they did such a good job on this thing. Okay, and now, you guessed it, more of the grease. This is where the yoke spring and the yoke actually touch each other. And again, it's the same reason. You've got metal on metal, and you just can't have that when it's under pressure without, you know, metal shavings or excessive wear starting to come. So this is one of the really important parts to make sure that you use the proper lubricant and get it in there. Because, you know, the other places that we oil the watch, which we'll do in just a little bit here, you know, they're for a different reason. It's not so much like metal on metal. It's usually metal on ruby. And that's a much, much less friction environment for two reasons. One, ruby is 9 on the Mohs scale and steel is not. And so that means that there's a friction difference between the two, which will reduce it. And also, there's no pressure. That ruby jewel will just hold the axle or the pinion, or sorry, the pivot in place, but it doesn't actually push in on any direction. So you can use a much, much lighter oil. And in fact, the watch will run better if you use a lighter oil. Okay, so let's go ahead and put in on the other side the pallet fork now, because the keyless works and the motion works are done. The train of wheels is in there. The barrel's in there. We're getting kind of close. Now I'm going to put on the automatic winding thing. I have no idea what this thing is called. It is kind of a complicated little device, but it is a ratcheting device. It is meant to turn both ways, but one way it grabs onto what it's turned, and then when it turns back, it actually winds the watch a little bit, and then when it turns the other way, again, it click, 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 so that it can't go back the other way unless a big weight turns and then does it again, and that's how the watch gets wound up. There's a beautiful little Automatic Works bridge here as well. This thing you can see is cut out so that you can see and work on the balance. Again, besides being just straight up beautiful, this movement is also, especially given its complexity, pretty darn nice to work on from our seat, you know, as like a watchmaker. So just a quick test here to make sure that this thing is working. And then there's the click that needs to go on as well. I left the click spring in place. It doesn't need to be removed. We just need to put a little bit of lubricant here just to make sure that it operates properly. But it is a little tricky because I have to get this screw in to hold the click in place. But the problem is the click spring is pushing it because it is made to provide tension. So I need to really kind of delicately find, yeah, this is tricky. This is where, you know, a plastic stick is not your hand, as it turns out. But I think I may have it. And if I can just get it started. Ugh. Okay, there we go. And once I find the right grip there, I can go ahead and fully screw in the click here as well. And there's the click spring that acts on it. And you also may have noticed that I forgot to put in a screw here. So let's go ahead and do that. I don't think that would have caused major issues, but probably not the best idea to just leave screws out of the movement. Seems to be a theme for me for this one. So again, you can see how it goes back and forth, and I can get an idea of how it works by just using it with my hand. And what is this? It's another screw that I forgot to put in. Oh, wow. Yeah, I'm really on a roll today. This is the screw for the pallet fork bridge, which apparently I did not screw down. And I noticed it and said, wait a minute, where is that? You don't want spare parts in watchmaking. That's what my dad used to call it when we were working on cars, and there'd be an extra bolt that we'd have to track down and figure out what we forgot. He used to call that spare parts. All right, let's see if this thing's going to kick back up to life for us. Yes, it is. It is running. We have a running movement. Now, it does seem to be running a little bit slow, however. That is not entirely uncommon for a movement that's quite old and also has not been lubricated fully yet. Remember, the whole train of wheels hasn't received any of its oil. So let's do that, and then we'll see how the watch is running. It's also not wound up very much at the moment either. This is a little bit annoying, but I do actually have to remove this bridge because there's some of the jewels that I need to oil, which are underneath it and the rotor. So let's head on over to the microscope and we'll start using some of our lightest viscosity oil. This is called Mobius 9010. Mobius is just a company that makes these really high quality synthetic oils that are used in watchmaking these days. But as you can see, I'm actually trying to put just the most minuscule drop. Sometimes people think that that little inner circle well is meant to be filled with oil, and it's generally not. You actually just want to have it around the pivot. Now, this is a new, to me, type of shock protection system, and I'm not actually, like, do I push here? No, that looks like a post. I don't know how to move it out of the way. Ow. Okay, I guess it just sits on a heavy post with the spring on the top, and I can just move it out of the way and then remove the shock setting. Well, simple enough. That's actually quite an elegant little solution. Maybe not as elegant as the ones we have now, but not too bad. So I can take the shock setting out, and this is an extremely important part to clean. This part of the movement is the one that receives the most action. Right? This is one where there's a very, I'm using relative terms here, right? Very heavy wheel with all the weight on the outside so that it can create a ton of momentum and keep going. And it is resting on a very thin axle or pivot, very, very thin. And so you want that thing to spin as absolutely freely as possible. And by the way, I don't mean spin, I mean oscillate. It goes back and forth, not in a circle. And that's what we're doing here. What this allows us to do is have a holder here that I'm putting on the bottom that is where the pivot goes through. And then on the top of it, there's a tiny droplet of oil suspended under a cap jewel, and that keeps the oil right where it needs to be to get this watch running absolute tip top. So now we can put the whole entire setting back into place. And again, this is a shock setting that it looks like we just move it over, just like we did to take it apart. I just want to be careful with this. You know, it feels a little, I don't know. I just don't want it to come apart. There we go. So that looks just about right. And that'll keep it that if you drop the watch, it'll have less of a chance of breaking that very small pivot that I mentioned before with the wheel on it. Now, you may be wondering though, well, wait a minute. Aren't there two axles on this thing? And you're absolutely right. There's one on the bottom as well. And so now we need to take that apart. This one is the same type of setup, but it isn't sitting on top. It's on the bottom. And so it has a different housing on it basically, but it's the same thing inside. As you can see, there's the actual housing where the axle goes in, and then next to it is the cap jewel. And again, these need to be completely clean. So I'll put them in a solvent that will dissolve the oil and any dirt that may be on them. But you got to be really picky about it. This is one of those things that like you would hardly believe that people actually do. But look at this. I'm going to use a piece of pegwood, which is just wood that I carved, whittled into this shape, to scrape off the tiniest residue that may have still been sitting on this thing. Like that's really how we do this. And now I'm going to take a tiny droplet of oil once again and place it in the center of this jewel. Oh, didn't come off. There we go. And then again, same process as before. I can replace the bottom setting. This is a very important step in watchmaking. This will increase the performance and longevity of the watch a lot. Like if these are the only things that you lubricated, it might be, it's definitely on the short list of things that you would never want to skip. Okay, so now we can put this little cover back on. And as you can see, this one's also spring loaded. You can see it's made of brass. It's very thin, and that allows it to be flexible, again, in the case that you drop your watch and it gets jarred really heavily. Those springs, this bottom one and the top one, will actually move and prevent that axle from breaking. Okay, now we can put the automatic works back on. And I'm not really sure where I'm supposed to put it. I assume I should put it in the middle, like directly in the middle of its full swing. And that way, if it swings one way towards the spring, it will wind it as much as it can. And then if it swings back the other way, it'll do the same. I've never, I'm not 100% sure that that's how it's supposed to go, but that's what logic tells me. So I'm going to go with it for now. I don't have like a spec sheet for this movement. I actually didn't even really look for one. But we'll see if it's able to wind the watch. Because once again, I just need to replace this this really lovely bridge. Again, it sort of frames the balance, which is, you know, one of the most exciting parts of a watch. It's the part that moves. Although currently it's not. Okay, there it is. I had to wind it up. So let's put it on the time grapher and see what our results are after some tweaking. 261 degrees of amplitude, a huge improvement. And look at that, -2, 0 seconds a day even for some of this. So this thing had life in it after all, and it is running beautifully now. That means that we can turn our attention to the case. Now, I'm not going to be polishing this case. It is far too beautiful for that with its lovely patina, but I am going to be giving it a bath in the ultrasonic cleaner here. This is a extremely useful tool for a watchmaker. It's also useful for a bunch of household things too, just kind of randomly. But anyway, I can use this to remove any dirt or debris without using abrasives, right? I want to keep that beautiful pattern that's on the case back and on the case itself. It's a pattern, a look, you could see it there on the case back, that steel has after it's been worn for years and years and years and years. It's very difficult to replicate, and I love it. All right, let's replace the crystal now. This one, again, I could redo these. Like I can refinish them. I've done it on the channel before, but they do get brittle. They're made of acrylic. And so there's no problem in just replacing it. These are very inexpensive. You know, this crystal probably cost me like $2 or $3, but they're very well made. They're made in Germany and they're awesome. So it just turns out that they're just not particularly expensive to manufacture. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my Rober press. Rober is a company that makes this special press. There's two ways that you can put crystals on. You can use a press that you just use your arm to push down on it, or you can use one that you turn the wheel like that to do it. And I prefer this one because it gives me a little bit more exact measurement type stuff rather than just sort of pressing down hard with a lever. And that's it. That's all we have to do to install the new crystal. And as you can see, it looks beautiful. So no reason not to do that. And it's also a nice juxtaposition against the relatively worn case. Taking a look at the case back too, it looks fine. Now let's take a look at the dial. Generally speaking, you do not want to clean dials. I know it sounds weird and you'll see dirty ones. This one's not dirty, but you do not want to get in there and start scrubbing on it with, you know, heavy duty stuff. These dials are made up of many layers of clear coats and inks and stuff like that. And you can rip right through those and ruin it. I've done it on the channel and I've learned my lesson. I am going to use some Rodico to just gently clean off the indices, the hour markers on this, because they're beautifully polished. They're faceted, meaning, you know, they have multiple angles to them. And they got a little bit of, you know, just age on them. And I figure a little tiny bit of Rodico, which is kind of like watchmaker silly putty, again, the tools. And it will just take off that outer layer if there happens to be anything on it. Now there's that part that goes through that I mentioned before, and this little thing that sticks on it. So I'm just going to use a sturdy pair of tweezers to do that. And all that's going to do is transfer that rotational turn from the other side of the movement to this side of the movement. And in this case, it'll transfer it to this, which is an elaborate little wheel with, you can see it engages with that little thing. And then the center part will actually engage with the what is it called? Like the dial, the little printed thing that actually shows you how much power your watch has on it on the other side. The disc, that's what we call it. Now take a look at this. This is called a dial washer, and this one's kind of beat up. It probably would work, but it's worth fixing because look what can happen. If there's nothing holding that down, this can actually lift up and disengage with the rest of the hands, and then your watch won't tell time anymore. But I've got a replacement here. This is all it takes, is just a really simple little brass washer, and it keeps that, as called the hour wheel, down. Okay, so here's the disc again. And this is a part I don't really understand. It's like, I need to make sure that this thing is at 0 because I made sure that the watch is out of power right now. but I want it to be 0 as you see it worn. So let's grab the dial, and here's a little window. And again, I want 0 to be in the middle of that so that that's the starting point. And then as you wind up the watch, I want it to go up higher. So let's just give it a shot here. It needs to be engaged, but it also needs to be in its hole. So it's a little bit tricky. And let's see how this goes just as a test run. No, that 0 looks like it's off to the left to me a little bit. So let's just finicky around with it here and see if I can't get that 0 a little bit more centered. It's going to really bug me if I don't get this right. These are the little details that matter for this type of stuff, no doubt about it. And let's see if the 0 is centered now. Hey, that's much better. Okay, so that is what I was hoping for right there with the 0 in the middle. And now I can go ahead and secure down. Let's give it a quick check to make sure that this disc can spin freely. And as you can see, it is in fact showing the wind that I'm putting in, which is the behavior that we would expect from this. So cool. This watch, what a pickup. I love this thing. Now we can put the hands on. And this is a fairly simple operation on a watch like this because there's no date. So we can just put it to whatever time we want as long as it's directly on an hour. Like I'm going to pick noon/midnight here. And that's it. As long as those hands are aligned properly for that, they'll be aligned for the other ones. And we can just continue with the hand reassembly. Now we do need to put on the seconds hand, which actually requires a different little adapter here. This tool comes with a variety of them, and this one's just a little bit smaller of an end so that you don't bend the edges of the hand down. And as you can see, the watch is running, and so is the seconds hand. Now, let's go ahead and case this watch up. I'm going to use my air blower here, and this is just going to allow me to remove any dust or debris, because that would be pretty annoying if it were stuck in the case. And I can then recase the watch, and look at this. Oh, it's looking so good. So cool. And now we can flip the movement over in the case, and we can put in the winding crown and stem. It's a little bit tricky to get it to engage. There we go. Wait, what is this? Wait, that should actually be going in all the way. That feels really weird. It feels like it's bumping up against something, like not internal to the watch, but on the outside. Yeah, this doesn't feel right to me. I think we need to inspect what's going on because that should just engage very easily. So I'm going to take out the winding crown and we're going to take a look at it here. And look what I found. Inside, there is the remnants of the old waterproof gasket, and they are in horrendous shape. And they are in fact preventing me from putting this crown on the watch. The thing is, I didn't know that this was in here. So it's actually kind of a blessing in disguise because look at that. That was sitting inside of there and blocking my ability to reinstall it. But this means that using, yes, those are dental tools, by the way, I got off of eBay. But using these tools to try to get in there. Come on, come on, come on. Ah, we got it. Oh my God. That is so satisfying to get that out of there. I can give a quick wash to this thing now, and we can replace that gasket with a modern O-ring that's made of much better materials than this. And it'll even increase the waterproof qualities of the watch. This watch is not fully waterproof, but this will help a bit from getting any water ingress through there if you happen to wash your hands or get caught in a rainstorm. So this is silicone grease that I'll put in and kind of pack it around the inside. And then I'll put a little bit using this little, I guess it's a tool, to put some on the outside of it as well. And then I can use my tweezers to make sure that it gets all the way inside of where it needs to be so that it can protect this watch with a little bit more waterproof. And I am so glad, actually. It's weird because at first I'm like, what is going on? This thing should be just entry, no problem. And now that we know why, and we were able to even do a better job on this service because of that problem. And this should solve the problem easily. So I can now replace the crown onto the stem, and now we can go back to redoing the case once again. It's the little things. It always is the little things with watchmaking. And let's see if it'll go. There we go. See, that's what we wanted to see, and it wouldn't allow me to do so. And it feels really good that it did. So now we can go ahead and reinstall the movement and the movement holder. Again, this is the really nicely designed one that I talked about at the very beginning, and make sure that the rotor there is able to freely move. What is this? Oh, are you serious right now? Wow, there is a gasket here. Oh my, look at this. It is metal colored. I didn't see it. Oh, look at that. It's coming out in one. Okay, this feels really good. I'm not going to lie. This is nice. This is why we couldn't get the case back off, because this old rubber gasket, it basically like vulcanizes. Like it turns into this like really dense, not quite metal, but like a really dried out rubber substance that honestly, I'm really glad that it came out that easily, because if it had been a few more years, it probably just would have been a melted goo mess and a real pain. But I didn't even know that was there. That again, it's the little things, right? So now what I can do is measure up for a new gasket, and that will mean that the next time that somebody wants to take this thing apart, they're not going to have to use the heavy duty tools on it. I also wonder if that penetrating oil helped with removing that gasket just now. I'm curious. I don't know if it works like that, but I'm actually a little surprised that that came out, but I'm mostly relieved that I actually saw it. These gaskets are all black now, so they're very easy to see. That one was freaking silver. It looked like metal. All right, so brand new gasket on. That feels good. We got a new gasket on the crown, and we got a new gasket on the case back as well. I'm going to go ahead and just use my case back friction ball here to put this back on. I can, really cinch it down if I want using the other tool, but for now, let's just continue with the reassembly. Now, as I showed you, the spring bars here are broken. The spring has flung off the tip of it, and so we're going to need to replace those. So I've got some nice modern new ones. Same design though. They're very simple. They're very, very reliable. These almost never fail on the watch. That what happened when we took it apart does happen occasionally, where when you take them off, they show that they're barely hanging on. But it is very rare for these to just like break on a watch. You have to do some pretty extraordinary stuff, or they have to be really bad shape. They have to basically fall apart. So once again, I will grab my my trusty and one of my favorite tools, this bolt action spring bar tool. This is by a guy on Instagram named Hassler Instruments. He makes these in his garage. Like he just makes them. All right, take a look at the finished product here. This is, I gotta say, this is like one of my favorite watches I've ever restored on the channel. Like straight up, the design is awesome. The movement is awesome. I love the power reserve functionality, and I absolutely love this watch. I am really thrilled with how this came out. It is beautiful. It is vintage. It has everything that I want and nothing that I don't. Thank you so much for coming along for this journey with me. It's really fun to have you along. I know this can be the end of your workday or how you start your morning, and I'm really honored that you spend it with me. If you want to spend even a little more time with me, you can follow me on Instagram. It's wristwatch_revival. You can find me over there, and I'll post when I put up a new video and some in-between content and stuff like that. Again, I just wanted to say a genuine thank you, and we'll see you next time.